What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, undefeated 3-division world champion, former junior welterweight undisputed world champion, currently the reigning WBO welterweight world champion, who is widely considered by many to be the #1 best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford is 38 wins, no losses, no draws, 29 big wins by way of knockout. 34 years of age, 5'8" with a 74-inch arm reach. He responds back to people and the critics saying that he's avoiding a fight with undefeated rising welterweight superstar title contender Jaron Boots Ennis, who is 28 wins, no losses, no draw, 26 big wins by way of knockout, 24 years of age, 5'10" with a 74-inch arm reach himself. Now, Terence Crawford, he stated on numerous occasions that Jaron Boots Ennis is a lot reminiscent of him and himself, okay? Jaron Boots Ennis has the ability to switch from orthodox to southpaw. Jaron Boots Ennis, has power in both hands, just like Terence Crawford, okay? Terence Crawford these days has become predominantly a southpaw, more so than an orthodox fighter. He's just not as effective in his stage in his career in the orthodox stance as he once was. But as he is in the southpaw stance. With that said, many people, Terence Crawford, he stated that, his team and people around him always, made him aware of Jaron Boots Ennis. And Terence Crawford stated that he reminds him a lot of him, okay? There's a lot of similarities, is what Terence Crawford stated, okay? And so with that said, Terence Crawford and his team, he responds to not looking to fight Jaron Boots Ennis. And he stated that a fight between Jaron Boots Ennis and 2-division world champion Puerto Rican superstar boxer Danny Swift Garcia would be a good stepping stone for Jaron Boots Ennis to get in the ring with Terence Crawford. That Terence Crawford is saying that Jaron Boots Ennis is not ready. Okay, this is something that Terence Crawford always states when it comes to pretty much all his opponents, okay? When Terence Crawford is asked about undefeated rising welterweight superstar Mexican title contender Virgil Ortiz Jr., 18 wins, no losses, no draw, 18 wins by way of knockout. He too is 24 years of age, 5'10" with a 70-inch arm reach. Well, Terence Crawford, he stated that Virgil Ortiz ain't ready, okay? When Virgil Ortiz was calling out Terence Crawford to his face, Terence Crawford was saying Virgil Ortiz isn't ready, okay? So this is something Terence Crawford always says, okay? He stated the same thing when it came to him fighting against Jose Benitez Jr. Before his fight with Jose Benitez Jr., Terence Crawford, he came face-to-face with Jose Benitez Jr., and there was a little bit of balking back and forth, a little bit of trash talking back and forth, and Terence Crawford, he told Jose Benitez Jr., you ain't ready. You better focus on your upcoming fight before you don't make your fight. Focus on your fight before you don't make it on your fight. That's what Terence Crawford stated to Jose Benitez Jr., and then he ended up fighting Jose Benitez Jr., okay? And things got a lot chippy, and he ended up stopping Jose Benitez Jr. in the late rounds of the fight. So this is not something new. Terence Crawford saying the fight is not ready. He's always going that route and says fighters are just simply not ready to fight him, okay? And so, Terence Crawford stated that Danny Garcia would be a good opponent. Now, oddly enough, Jaron Boots Ennis is, as a relationship, I don't know if they're friends with Danny Garcia. I would say they're friends. Danny Garcia is from Philadelphia. Jaron Boots Ennis is from Philadelphia. So they both from Philadelphia. They're both very familiar with one another. Terence Crawford is saying that that's a good fight to get to know if Jaron Boots Ennis is ready for Terence Crawford, the level of a fighter of Terence Crawford. Danny Garcia is 36 wins, 3 losses, no draws, 21 wins by way of knockout. He was never knocked out and stopped in his career. He is also 33 years of age, 5'8" with a 68.5-inch arm reach, power in both hands. that's a fight that Terence Crawford always talked about wanting to have, a fight between himself and Danny Garcia. The last time we saw Danny Garcia in the ring is when he took on the biggest rival of Terence Crawford, in undefeated unified WBC IBF welterweight world champion superstar boxer, who is widely considered by many to be top 3 best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, and Errol the True Spence Jr. Errol Spence Jr. has 27 wins, no losses, no draws, 21 big wins by way of knockout, 32 years of age, 5'9.5" with a 72-inch arm reach. With that said, Danny Garcia and Errol Spence, they fought December 5th of 2020. That's the last time we saw Errol Spence in the ring, oddly enough, and that's the last time we saw Danny Garcia in the ring, right? The difference is Errol Spence, he suffered an injury as to why he wasn't in the ring, a broken detached retina as sort of reason why he wasn't in the ring, and that was a fight off a 14-month layoff for Errol Spence. Danny Garcia, he had fought Ivan Redcash in January of 2020, so he had fought going into the Errol Spence fight early that year. But with that said, Errol Spence, he just outclassed Danny Garcia, okay? He won a unanimous decision. The only time that Danny Garcia truly had any success in the fight was when Errol Spence was fatiguing. Like I said, it was a 14-month layoff. So when Errol Spence fatigued and Errol Spence was a little off balance, his timing was off, it was more so what Errol Spence didn't do as to what Danny Garcia did do for the success that Danny Garcia had in the fight, okay? So he got dominated, and Danny Garcia has been telling the world that he wants to move up to junior middleweight, 154. He would be the biggest name at 154, he feels like, and he feels like, he could dominate and be the superstar at 154 junior middleweight division. I just think those guys at junior middleweight for Danny Garcia is far too big. But from my understanding, Danny Garcia was not even willing to spar Jaron Boots Ennis, let alone actually fight him under the lights when it counts, okay, with small gloves on. So if you're not willing to spar Jaron Boots Ennis with 16 or 12 ounce or however many ounces gloves you wear and sparring with headgear, imagine with 8-ounce gloves and no headgear. I don't think that Danny Garcia by a long shot is interested in fighting Jaron Boots Ennis, okay? He's very aware of what Jaron Boots Ennis can do. And Danny Garcia, he even stated that he believes Jaron Boots Ennis can be a world champion as high as 168. He believes he's going to be a multi-division world champion, and he believes he's going to be undisputed, and he believes he could be a champion as high as 168. So Danny Garcia views Jaron Boots Ennis in very, very high regards, okay? And so it just lets you know that Danny Garcia, may not be, he has reservations about getting in the ring with Jaron Boots Ennis, okay? And so that's just simply not going to happen. It would be a good test for Jaron Boots Ennis. It would be a big name for Jaron Boots Ennis, and it would definitely be a good fight for Danny Garcia, to make a name for himself once again in title contention. But again, Danny Garcia spotted training, working out. He's always dibbling and dabbles. But I just don't think that Danny Garcia has too much interest in going up and fighting Jaron Boots Ennis. I think he has more interest in moving up in weight, more so than competing against Jaron Ennis. So Jaron Ennis, he's fighting May 14th, co-main event for Jamel Charlo, Brian Castano, undisputed showdown. That's huge for him in California, Carson, California, I believe it is. So that's a huge opportunity for Jaron Boots Ennis, and he's going to fight for the IBF, International Boxing Federation's title eliminator, against Custio Clayton, who's an undefeated fighter himself out of Canada. So Danny Garcia has no interest in fighting Jaron Boots Ennis. Now, Terence Crawford is void of an opponent, okay? He needs an opponent. And so with that said, they're saying that Jaron Boots Ennis is not ready. Same thing he said about Jose Benavidez Jr. He gave him an opportunity, and Jose Benavidez Jr., what did he do up until that point, okay? And there was a little bit of struggle on the part of Terence Crawford in the fight with Jose Benavidez Jr., okay? He had to get, Jose Benavidez Jr. is very big, okay? He's very rangy, very tall, very aggressive, and he does have power, and he has boxing skills. Okay, he has a jab. You know, he's not just a big plodding forward, you know, lumbering guy, you know, and fighting in the Mexican style. So Jaron Ennis is fighting Custio Clayton. 19 wins, no losses, 1 draw, 12 wins by way of knockout, 34 years of age, 5'9" with a 69.5-inch arm reach. That's going to take place May 14th, like I stated. So Jose Benavidez Jr., you know, Terence Crawford gave him the opportunity, okay? And, you know, I think that, why not? Jaron Boots Ennis is a much bigger name, okay? Much bigger, you know, commodity than Jose Benavidez. Jose Benavidez Jr. definitely in his heyday was definitely a blue chip prospect. A lot of people thought highly of Jose Benavidez Jr. You know, he's only 29 years old, but he suffered a major injury, you know, where he got hit in his leg, unfortunately, to his leg. And, you know, he just never was the same. He even made a comeback at, I believe, at 154 in his last fight, or 160 even. And he just didn't look the same. He's not mobile. So he's 27 wins now, 1 loss, 1 draw, 18 wins by way of knockout. He was stopped by Terence Crawford in their fight in the 12th round. So he was stopped by Terence Crawford. That was back in October 2018. He's 5'10.5" with a 71-inch arm reach, okay? And so his height and his reach was bothering Terence Crawford. Jaron Ennis is 5'10" with a 74-inch arm reach. So he has 3-inch arm reach advantage over Jose Benavidez Jr., okay? But he's a much better athlete than Jose Benavidez Jr. is, okay? Much more versatile, you know, quicker on his feet. So Terence Crawford, he in the beginning of the fight, he struggled. He had to figure out Jose Benavidez Jr., okay? And so with that said, you know, again, Jose Benavidez Jr. wasn't a world champion. Okay, he wasn't, you know, never fought for a world title, never won a world title, and you gave him an opportunity. Why not give Jaron Boots Ennis the opportunity? Okay, you avoid of a opponent. Terence Crawford, you know, is now a network promotional free agent. Doesn't have he's not tied down to Top Rank, Bob Arum, and ESPN, so he could fight whomever, whenever, and however he wants. So it's a good fight. Now I understand he's saying, you know, a good fight would be Danny Garcia, but a better fight would be him versus Jaron Boots Ennis. Stylistically, a lot comparisons, and Jaron Boots Ennis, you know, he stated he would beat Terence Crawford pretty easy. Don't be surprised how easily he beats a guy like Terence Crawford. Okay, you know, so it would be a huge fight. It makes sense too. You know, he's obviously 10 years younger than Terence Crawford. He's 2 inches taller than Terence Crawford, maybe 2.5 inches taller than Terence Crawford. And Terence Crawford won't have an arm reach advantage. There won't be a position where Terence Crawford gets in southpaw stance or orthodox stance where he'll put Jaron Boots Ennis in an uncomfortable position, because Jaron Boots Ennis is just as versatile as Terence Crawford is. So it makes sense for this fight, but it also makes sense that Terence Crawford is now saying that, you know, that they should fight. He should fight and make a name for himself against Danny Garcia. But I want to say, well, you didn't put these stipulations on Jose Benavidez Jr. when he was looking for the fight, and he called you out. So it will be a good fight. Let's see how everything unfolds. Let's see what, I know Terence Crawford at this stage of his career is definitely looking to unify the titles against Errol Spence. That makes for the biggest fight in the sport of boxing, Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence. That's the fight that the boxing world wants to see, and I agree. That's the fight that I want to see as well. So, you know, that would be a huge fight. So, but another big fight would be Terence Crawford versus Keith Thurman, right? Keith Thurman, former unified welterweight world champion. And Keith Thurman, he doesn't have a fight coming up. That was Terence Crawford's #1 objective at one point in time, was to fight, you know, Keith Thurman. So, you know, Keith Thurman only has 1 loss. That loss coming to Manny Pacquiao. So it just makes sense that he fights Keith Thurman. That's the fight that I would love to see in his next fight, if he ain't going to fight Virgil Ortiz Jr., who just pulled out of his fight because, you know, he suffered a illness, and a fight with Jaron Boots Ennis, if he's not going to fight Keith Thurman. Maybe he fights Josh Taylor. Let's see how this all unfolds and plays out. But that's all I got for y'all. Make sure you hit the like button. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue, Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon to get all the new notification. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shouts out to the entire LDBC. Shouts out to New Media. Shouts out to Black Media Roll. Make sure you like and share the videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.